Have you ever wondered what makes Christmas truly unforgettable? Is it the gifts, the songs, or something much more simple, like the taste of a perfect plate of jollof rice? In the small village of Aku, nestled between rolling hills and the bustling countryside, Christmas wasn't just a day, it was a season of warmth, family, and food. For Ngozi, a 24-year-old young woman, the holiday was incomplete without one thing: jollof rice, the dish her grandmother, Mama Ifeoma, was famous for. Every year, their home was filled with the savory scent of rice cooked with tomatoes, onions, and the perfect blend of spices. Nothing else could make Christmas feel so alive. But this year, everything seemed different. Chijioke, her older brother, who worked as a banker in the city, had called to say he wouldn't be able to come home for Christmas. His voice was strained with work commitments, leaving Ngozi with an aching sense of loss. "Mama, do you think Chijioke will really come?" she asked, as she leaned against the doorway of the kitchen, where her grandmother was preparing for the festivities. The house was filled with the sounds of clattering pots and the smell of stew bubbling on the stove. Mama Ifeoma looked up from her cooking and smiled warmly. "Don't worry, my child. Christmas will still be special. Even if your brother cannot come, we have each other. And we will have jollof rice." She paused for a moment, her eyes twinkling with a touch of mischief. "Besides, you can't have Christmas without my jollof rice, can you?" Ngozi smiled faintly, though her heart was heavy. It wasn't just about the rice. It was the laughter, the stories, the noise that filled the house when Chijioke was around. Without him, it didn't feel like the same celebration. But as the days passed, Ngozi could feel the weight of her grandmother's age. Mama Ifeoma, once as strong as an oak tree, seemed to be slowing down. She coughed more often, and her movements grew slower. Ngozi tried not to worry, but the unease settled in her chest. Her grandmother was not the woman she used to be, and with Chijioke absent, it felt like something was missing from their holiday. As the eve of Christmas approached, Ngozi stood in the kitchen, chopping tomatoes and onions. The preparations for the Christmas feast were underway, but her mind kept drifting to the absence of her brother and the quiet worry that her grandmother might not be well enough to make the dish everyone in the village raved about. "I'll make it this year," Ngozi whispered to herself. "I'll make the jollof rice." The next morning, Ngozi woke up early. The sun was still rising, casting a soft golden light over the village of Aku. Outside, children played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the air. It was Christmas Eve, and the whole village was preparing for the big celebration. Ngozi moved quietly around the house, trying not to disturb her grandmother, who was still resting. The kitchen was filled with the familiar smell of spices, herbs, and stews. Mama Ifeoma had always been the heart of their Christmas celebrations. Every year, people in the village would come to their home, drawn by the mouth-watering smell of Mama Ifeoma's jollof rice. But this year, everything felt different. Chijioke wasn't coming, and Mama Ifeoma seemed weaker than usual. Ngozi was afraid that they wouldn't be able to celebrate like they always did. She looked at the stove, where a pot of rice was already cooking. It was time to begin. Mama Ifeoma had taught her everything she knew about cooking jollof rice: how to make the rice fluffy, the sauce rich with tomato, and the spices perfectly balanced. But this was the first time Ngozi would try to make it alone. She took a deep breath and began to work. The rice needed to be washed and drained, the onions chopped finely, and the tomatoes blended into a smooth paste. Ngozi moved quickly, determined to make the best jollof rice ever, even though the kitchen felt much quieter without her grandmother's guiding voice. But as the morning went on, she began to feel the weight of the task. The stove was running low on gas, and some of the key ingredients were missing. Mama Ifeoma usually sent someone to the market, but with her health not being as good, it was up to Ngozi to find them. She had to make do with what she had. Ngozi stepped outside, looking around the village. The market was still open, and maybe she could find some extra tomatoes and peppers. As she walked through the streets, she bumped into her neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo, who was carrying a basket of fresh fruit. "Oh, Ngozi. What are you doing out here on Christmas Eve?" Mrs. Adebayo asked with a smile. "I'm looking for a few things for the jollof rice," Ngozi said. "Mama Ifeoma is not feeling well, and I want to make sure everything is perfect." Mrs. Adebayo looked at Ngozi with a knowing look. "Don't worry, child. I've got everything you need. I'll bring it over in a few minutes. You just make sure you keep that stove burning." Ngozi's heart lifted. She didn't know how she could have managed without her neighbor's help. She smiled and thanked Mrs. Adebayo, feeling a little lighter. The hours went by quickly as Ngozi prepared the rest of the meal. She fried the chicken, simmered the stew, and arranged the plates and bowls for the family dinner. The familiar sounds of Christmas songs played softly in the background, but there was a slight sadness in the air. Ngozi couldn't help but think of her brother, wondering if he would truly make it home after all. The thought of celebrating without him felt incomplete. "Mama, I think the rice is ready," Ngozi called softly, looking up from the stove. She had cooked it just like Mama Ifeoma had shown her, checking the sauce's color, the texture of the rice, and the aroma of the spices. It looked perfect. Mama Ifeoma sat in her favorite chair, looking out the window, but she was too tired to move much. She smiled faintly when Ngozi brought the pot of jollof rice to her. "You've done well, my dear," she said quietly. Her voice was weak, but there was a sparkle in her eyes. Ngozi smiled back. "It's just like you always make it, Mama. But I miss having you help." Mama Ifeoma chuckled softly. "I've passed on my knowledge. You are ready now. You've done more than just make jollof rice. You've brought the spirit of Christmas into our home." Ngozi's heart swelled with pride and love for her grandmother. She had worked hard, but it was the love and care that Mama Ifeoma had passed down to her that made it all come together. Later that afternoon, the sun began to set, and the house was alive with the sounds of preparation. The rich smell of stews and jollof rice filled the air. Mama Ifeoma sat in her favorite chair, resting and watching Ngozi work. She had been more tired than usual, but she didn't want to miss out on the holiday excitement. Ngozi looked over at her grandmother, her heart heavy with worry. She wasn't sure how much longer Mama Ifeoma could keep up with their Christmas traditions. But she also knew that she couldn't let the holiday pass without making Mama Ifeoma proud. "I think the rice is ready, Mama," Ngozi said, turning off the stove. She placed a bowl of the finished jollof rice in front of her grandmother. Mama Ifeoma smiled weakly and took a small bite. Her face lit up with a familiar warmth. "Ngozi, this is just like how I make it. You have done well, my dear." Ngozi felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. The jollof rice was perfect, just like Mama Ifeoma's. As the evening grew darker, a knock came at the door. Ngozi opened it to find a surprised Chijioke standing outside, his arms full of bags and gifts. "Surprise," he said with a grin. "I couldn't stay away from my family this Christmas. I've brought gifts and food for everyone." Ngozi's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her brother tightly. "Chijioke, you're here. We were just about to sit down for dinner." Chijioke laughed, looking around the house. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. And I can smell Mama's jollof rice all the way outside." "You've made it, Ngozi." "I did my best," she said, smiling through her tears. "But I couldn't have done it without Mrs. Adebayo's help." The family gathered around the table, filled with steaming bowls of jollof rice, chicken, and vegetables. The room was warm with laughter and love. Mama Ifeoma, despite her tiredness, beamed at her family. "Look at you both," she said, "so grown up, so full of life. I am proud of you both." Ngozi looked at her brother and grandmother, feeling the love between them fill the room. It was more than just the food that made this Christmas special, it was the family, the traditions, and the care they showed each other. As they all dug into the delicious jollof rice, Ngozi realized that even without all the perfect details, this Christmas had been unforgettable. It wasn't just about the rice. It was about the love that went into making it, the moments shared, and the bond they had as a family.